stop everything. Because what just leaked isn't drama, it's devastation. What Kandi Burruss allegedly uncovered about Todd Tucker and Porsha Williams has sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment world, and insiders are calling it one of the most calculated betrayals ever whispered behind reality TV cameras. This isn't a rumor. This isn't messy shade. This is something deeper, something colder, something structured. Because late last night, a series of alleged private messages no one was ever supposed to see, began circulating in tight circles before exploding onto social media. Messages that didn't read like gossip, messages that didn't feel emotional. They felt planned, strategic, almost contractual. And the moment those messages reached Kandi, everything changed. Witnesses say she didn't cry at first. She froze, completely. Like her entire world had just been rewritten in real time. Because according to multiple insiders, what she discovered wasn't just about loyalty being broken. It was about an alleged agreement, a quiet understanding between Todd and Porsha that may have existed long before anyone ever questioned their dynamic. And if even part of it is real, then every interaction, every scene, every moment fans thought they understood was something else entirely. But here's where it gets explosive. Because Kandi didn't stay silent. Not this time. Sources claim what followed was not a conversation. It was a confrontation. An emotional detonation behind closed doors that escalated so fast, so intensely, that parts of it were allegedly recorded. And those recordings? They're starting to surface. Voices raised, accusations flying. Or one line, just one, cutting through the chaos. You had an arrangement, and you thought I'd never find out. And that's when everything spiraled. Because this isn't just a betrayal. This is a blueprint. And if what's about to come out next is true, then this story isn't ending anytime soon. The moment everything unraveled didn't look dramatic at first. No shouting, no broken glass, no cameras catching the exact second the truth slipped through the cracks. It started with a phone, face down, buzzing, again and again and again. According to insiders, Kandi Burruss had been ignoring it for nearly 10 minutes before something, maybe instinct, maybe exhaustion, finally made her pick it up. What she saw on that screen wasn't a headline, wasn't a rumor. It was a message. Forwarded, then another, then a screenshot. And the second she opened it, everything changed, because what stared back at her didn't read like casual conversation. It didn't feel messy or emotional or impulsive. It felt calculated, precise, like something that had been written with intention. The first line that insiders claim she saw: "We stick to what we agreed. No slipping now." At first, it didn't even register. Agreed. On what? That's what she reportedly whispered under her breath, staring at the screen like she was trying to force it to make sense. But then came the second message. "We've come too far to mess this up now." And that's when the confusion started turning into something else, something heavier. Because these weren't random texts. These weren't jokes. They carried weight, context, history, and the names attached to those messages were allegedly connected back to Todd Tucker and Porsha Williams. At first, she didn't react. Sources say she just stared, scrolling, rereading, trying to find a version of reality where this meant something harmless. But the deeper she went, the worse it got. Because more messages followed, fragments of conversations, references to timing, mentions of keeping things aligned. Even one chilling line that insiders claim made her physically stand up. She can't know how this really started. That's when everything inside her shifted. Because this wasn't just suspicious anymore. This was deliberate. And the timeline didn't match what she had been told. According to those close to the situation, Kandi didn't immediately call anyone. She didn't text back. She didn't confront. She did something far more unsettling. She went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from confusion, the kind that comes from realization. Because insiders say in that moment, she started connecting dots. Moments that once felt small suddenly became loud. Comments that once felt harmless now felt loaded. Even past conversations, things she had brushed off, started replaying in her mind with a completely different meaning. And the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't new. This had been building. And she had been standing in the middle of it, without knowing. That's when the second wave hit, because just as she was processing those messages, another file came through. Not text, audio, short, unlabeled. And according to insiders, she hesitated before pressing play, because something in her already knew. This wasn't going to help, but she played it anyway. At first, it was hard to hear. Background noise, muffled voices. But then, two voices became clear. One believed to be Todd, the other widely speculated to be Porsha. And the tone, casual, too casual. That's what made it worse, because there was no tension, no hesitation, just familiarity. And then came the line that insiders say changed everything. It's handled. She trusts me. Silence. Not from the recording, from Kandi. Because in that moment, everything stopped. Sources say she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Because that sentence, it didn't just suggest something was happening. It suggested awareness, planning, execution. And suddenly, the messages made sense. The tone, the wording, the implication of an agreement. This wasn't random, this wasn't emotional, this was structured. And that realization, that's what broke her. Not loudly, not yet, but internally. Because betrayal hurts. But discovering intention behind it, that's something else entirely. That's disorienting. That's destabilizing. That's the kind of realization that makes you question everything. Not just what's happening now, but everything that led up to it. And insiders say that's exactly what happened. Because the next thing she did wasn't explosive. It was controlled. She picked up her phone, scrolled back through older messages, old conversations with Todd, moments that once felt normal, and now felt different, colder, like there were pieces missing, like she had been given part of the truth, but never the full picture. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge, because buried in those older conversations was a line, one she hadn't thought about in months, one that didn't seem important at the time, but now felt like a warning she had missed. Trust me, everything is already in place. That's when the shift happened. Not confusion, not doubt, certainty. And with that certainty came something else. Anger. Not loud, not chaotic, focused. Because now this wasn't about figuring out what was happening. This was about confronting it. And according to insiders, she didn't wait. She didn't sit with it overnight. She didn't give herself time to calm down. She moved, fast, direct, and exactly toward the person she needed answers from. Because within minutes, she was on her way to see Todd. No warning, no message, no heads up. And that's what made what happened next so explosive. Because when confrontations happen without preparation, there's no script, no polished response, no time to hide. Only truth or panic. And according to multiple insiders, what happened when she walked through that door was neither calm nor controlled. Because the second Todd saw her face, he knew, not what she knew, but that she knew something. And that moment, that split second of recognition, is where everything truly began to collapse. Because before she even said a word, before she even showed him the messages, before she even pressed play on that audio, he said something. One sentence. Unprompted, unplanned, and according to insiders, it's the sentence that may have confirmed everything before the confrontation even started. You weren't supposed to find out like this. That sentence didn't just hang in the air. It detonated. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Before Kandi Burruss even said a word, before she showed him the messages, before she pressed play on the audio, Todd Tucker had already said the one thing he should never have said. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because those weren't the words of someone confused. Those weren't the words of someone falsely accused. Those were the words of someone caught. Sources say Kandi didn't scream immediately. She didn't throw accusations. She just looked at him, long, hard, like she was waiting for him to fix what he had just broken with a single sentence. But he didn't. He couldn't. And that silence, that hesitation, that's when the explosion started. Not all at once, but fast. Her voice, controlled at first, cut straight through the room. Find out what, Todd? Direct, sharp. No room to escape. And insiders say that's when he shifted. Not into denial, into explanation. Which somehow made it worse, because instead of shutting it down, he started talking. Fast, too fast. Words overlapping, sentences that didn't quite connect. And when someone starts explaining before being accused, that's when people stop listening to what they're saying and start paying attention to why they're saying it. According to insiders, Kandi didn't interrupt him, not right away. She let him speak, let him build whatever version of reality he was trying to construct. And then, calmly, she placed her phone on the table, screen lit, messages open, and asked one question. Then explain this. That's when everything broke, because the moment his eyes hit those messages, his expression changed, not dramatically. Not enough for someone who didn't know him to notice, but Kandi, she noticed because she knows him. And that subtle shift, that microsecond of recognition, was louder than any confession. He tried to recover. Of course he did. Sources say he leaned back slightly, exhaled, and said the one thing people always say when they're cornered. It's not what it looks like, but here's the problem. It looked like everything. It looked like intention. It looked like coordination. It looked like something that had been happening longer than anyone admitted. And Kandi wasn't buying it. Not this time, because instead of reacting emotionally, she reached for the second piece, the audio, and without warning, she pressed play. The room filled with those same muffled voices, that same casual tone, that same devastating line. It's handled, as she trusts me. And according to insiders, Todd didn't speak, not during the clip, not immediately after. Because some things, you can't explain away in real time. You need time, you need space, you need distance. But he didn't have any of that, because Kandi was right there, watching, waiting. And then she asked the question that insiders say hit harder than anything else that night. Was I part of the plan, or just in the way of it? Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. And that's when the breakdown happened. Not the kind people expect, not screaming, not chaos. Something quieter, something heavier. Sources say her voice dropped, lower, more controlled, but filled with something far more dangerous than anger. Understanding. Because in that moment, she wasn't guessing anymore. She wasn't asking for clarity. She already had it. And that's when she said it. Soft, but sharp enough to cut through everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was arranged. And that word? Arranged. That's what changed everything. Because now this wasn't about emotion. This wasn't about impulse. This was about structure. And structure implies planning. And planning implies intention. And intention. That's where betrayal becomes something else entirely. Meanwhile, outside that room, the internet was already starting to move. Because remember, those messages didn't just reach Kandi. They were already circulating. Quietly at first, then faster. And by the time this confrontation was happening, people online were already asking questions. Vague at first, cryptic tweets. Something bigger is about to drop. This Kandi situation is not what you'll think. And then, The first leak hit. Not the full messages, just fragments, cropped screenshots. Enough to spark curiosity, not enough to confirm anything, but enough to start a fire. Back inside, the confrontation escalated, because Todd finally spoke again. But instead of denying, he pivoted. Sources say he started framing things differently, not as betrayal, but as misunderstanding, as business, as conversations that didn't mean what they looked like. And that's when Kandi reacted. For real. Because the second he said the word business, something snapped. Her voice rose, not uncontrolled, but undeniable. Don't you dare call this business. That line, according to insiders, echoed, because it exposed the core of the situation. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was layered, complicated, possibly tied to things beyond emotion. And that's what made it worse. Because betrayal in love is one thing. Betrayal wrapped in strategy? That's something else entirely. And then came the moment no one expected, because just as the confrontation reached its peak, another name entered the room. Not physically, digitally, because Kandi's phone buzzed again, and this time, it wasn't a leak. It was a message, direct, from Porsha Williams, short, simple, but devastating. We need to talk before this gets worse. That's when everything froze, because timing is everything. And that message didn't feel random, it felt reactive. Like she already knew something had surfaced. Like she already knew Kandi had seen something. And that realization added a whole new layer to everything. Because now the question wasn't just, what did Todd do? It became, who else knew, and how long had they known? Sources say Kandi stared at that message for several seconds, not typing, not responding, just staring. And then she did something unexpected. She turned the phone around, showed Todd, and asked one final question. Is she part of this too? And what happened next is where this situation takes its darkest turn yet, because according to insiders, Todd didn't answer immediately. And that silence was all the answer she needed. Because sometimes, what someone doesn't say confirms everything they never wanted to admit, and just when it seemed like the confrontation couldn't get any worse. Another leak dropped. This time, a video. And what was in that video might explain why that message from Porsha came exactly when it did. The video didn't creep into the timeline, it crashed into it. No warning, no teaser. Just a sudden upload from an account no one recognized, and within minutes, it was everywhere. Reposted, dissected, slowed down, zoomed in, enhanced, like it held the final piece everyone had been searching for. Because this time, it wasn't messages, it wasn't audio, it was visual. And visuals don't leave room for imagination. The clip was short, grainy, low lighting, but unmistakable. A private lounge. No cameras supposed to be there. No audience. Just a controlled, intimate space. And inside that space, 3 figures. One clearly Todd Tucker. One widely believed to be Porsha Williams. And the third, not fully visible. But enough context for viewers to assume. Enough movement. Enough positioning. Enough familiarity. And that's what made it explosive. Because nothing in the video looked accidental. Nothing looked awkward. So everything looked comfortable. Too comfortable. The kind of comfort that doesn't come from a new interaction. It comes from something established, something repeated, something understood. And suddenly the whispers about an arrangement didn't feel like whispers anymore. They felt like context. Because in that clip, there was no tension, no hesitation, just conversation, close proximity, energy that suggested history, not curiosity. And once that video hit the internet, everything changed, again. Because now people weren't just connecting dots, they were watching them line up. Back inside, Kandi Burruss hadn't seen the video yet. Not immediately. She was still standing there, phone in hand, Todd in front of her. Silence between them doing more damage than any argument could. But then, Another buzz. Another notification. Another message. And this time, it wasn't private, it was everywhere. Clips being sent, links flooding in, people tagging her. And the moment she opened it, everything inside her shifted one final time. Because now, it wasn't just something she had read. It wasn't just something she had heard. It was something she could see. And seeing it made it real in a way nothing else had. Sources say she didn't react immediately. Again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like processing. It felt like impact, like something had landed so deeply, so completely, that there was no immediate response available. And then she laughed, but not in a way anyone expected. Not light, not amused, short, sharp, almost disbelieving. Because sometimes when reality doesn't make sense, laughter is the only thing that comes out. And then she said something that insiders describe as the moment everything ended. That's not new. 3 words, but devastating, because it suggested something no one had fully considered yet. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't the beginning. This was just the first time it had been seen. And that realization shifted everything, because now this wasn't about discovery. It was about duration. How long had this been happening? How many moments had she missed? How many interactions had been disguised as something else? And the worst question of all, how many people knew? Because at this point, the situation wasn't just about Todd. It wasn't just about Porsha. It was about awareness, about silence, about who had seen pieces of this and said nothing. And that's when the internet took it even further. Because alongside the video came another drop. Not footage, not messages, but a thread, detailed, structured, allegedly from someone close to production. No proof, no verification, but enough specifics to feel dangerous. It outlined timelines, moments where scenes were allegedly rearranged, interactions that were edited down, conversations that never made it to air. And one line in that thread stopped everything. They weren't hiding it. They were managing when it would be seen. That sentence sent shockwaves because it suggested control, narrative control, timing control. And suddenly, this didn't feel like chaos anymore. It felt like strategy. Meanwhile, back in that room, Kandi was no longer asking questions. She wasn't confronting. She wasn't even looking for explanations anymore. Because at some point, when enough pieces line up, you stop needing confirmation. You already have it. Sources say she picked up her bag, slowly, calmly, not rushed, not frantic. And that calmness, that's what made it terrifying. Because when someone reaches that level of stillness, it means something inside has settled. A decision, a conclusion, an end. Todd tried to speak. Of course he did. Tried to explain, tried to reframe, tried to soften what was already too sharp to hold. But she didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't engage, because there was nothing left to discuss. And just before she reached the door, she said one final thing, not loud, not emotional, but clear. I was never part of the agreement. I was the cover. And that was it. Because those words didn't just end the conversation. They redefined the entire situation. Because now, this wasn't about betrayal inside a relationship. This was about positioning inside a system. And if that's true, then everything changes. Everything. Because being lied to is one thing, but being used as part of something bigger, that's something else entirely. And as she walked out, no tears, no breakdown, just silence. The internet continued exploding behind her, fans choosing sides, clips going viral, theories multiplying by the second, celebrities posting cryptic reactions, some subtle, some not subtle at all. And through all of it, no clear denial, no unified statement, no one stepping forward to shut it down completely. And that silence, that's what kept everything alive. Because in situations like this, silence doesn't calm things. It confirms that something exists, even if no one names it directly. Hours later, one final post appeared. From Kandi, black background, white text, no caption, just one sentence. "I saw enough." And beneath it, a timestamp. Tomorrow, no explanation, no context, just a promise. And if everything that's already come out is just the beginning, then whatever she's about to reveal next might not just expose what happened, it might expose how long it's been happening and who made sure it stayed hidden. Because this story isn't ending, it's escalating. And the next piece might be the one no one can come back from. And if you think what you just watched was the full story, you're already too late. Because this isn't finished. Not even close. What's already leaked, the messages, the audio, that video, those are just fragments. Pieces of something much bigger that's still unfolding in real time around Kandi Burruss, Todd Tucker and Porsha Williams. And if that final post means what it looks like it means, then what drops next could completely change everything you think you understand about this situation. We're talking about deeper receipts, real timelines, context that could connect every single moment people have been questioning. So don't sit back and think you'll catch it later. Because by the time later comes, this story could already be 10 steps ahead. And you'll be trying to piece together something that's already exploded. Hit like right now if you felt that shift. If you saw those clues lining up in ways that don't feel accidental. Drop your take in the comments. Was this emotional betrayal or something way more calculated? And most important, subscribe. Because when that next reveal hits, and it will hit, you do not want to miss it. Not the receipts, not the names, not the moment everything finally connects. Stay locked in. Because this isn't just drama anymore. This is a story that's about to blow wide open.